What does it take to score in the 170s? What habits or type of LSAT student fits the profile? Well, that's actually a pretty good segue into. I wanted to cover the what the LSAT is testing. Okay, so I said it earlier: English, logic, and how hard you can work. English. Lawyers in the United States are gladiators of the English language. You will be doing battle using English words and sentences. It is a stern test of your mastery of the English language. It's not a vocabulary test and it's not a grammar test, but they are making arguments and asking you questions that have convoluted syntax and pretty high level of vocabulary, and you have to be able to read it and figure that shit out. And if you just like don't know a lot of the words, or if you are uncomfortable reading a high volume of dense English text, then you might be fighting a bit of an uphill battle on the LSAT. You will get better at English if you study LSAT. There are 90 practice tests available with 100 questions per practice test. There's 9,000 of these questions. The more you study it, the better you'll get at the English part of it. But the LSAT is testing English. Again, that's because that's the weapons that lawyers in the United States are going to be using every single day. So people who, if you want to reach the 170s, you don't do that by being bad at English. That's just not a thing. 2, the LSAT is testing logic. If you look at the logic games, and we do have a syllabus here, so if you look at this game about the film festival, you'll see that we've got these films being shown during a film club's festival, and it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and every film has to be shown at least once, but no film can be shown more than once on any day, and then there's a whole bunch of other complicated rules about it. And all they're really testing, when I say they're testing your logic, all they're really testing is common sense. Can you combine those rules together in a way that allows you to learn something else about the system? They aren't testing fancy logic. You don't need to ever have studied formal logic. I never studied formal logic. It's, like representational logic or whatever. It's just not necessary. But common sense is. One thing that they're going to do is they're going to say something like, in fact, this is on every single test. They're going to say something like, if you're in Los Angeles, then you're in California. John's not in Los Angeles, therefore John can't be in California. And then they just move on to the next thing as if that makes sense. But a smart high school kid, I have a niece who's a freshman in high school, and if you said that to her, she would go, wait, what? Yeah, Los Angeles is in California. But just because you're not in Los Angeles, that doesn't mean that you're not in California, because there's lots of other places in California. That flaw, we label it confusing sufficient for necessary, but it's really just a form of common sense. And the LSAT is so easy that flaw appears on every single test. I dare you to find an official LSAT that does not have the sufficient necessary flaw. You can't. It's not a thing. They test that flaw on every single test. And so, yeah, they're testing your logic, but it's common sense logic. If you can read and understand the question, then the logical chops that are required are really pretty basic. It's kind of like they're testing your patience just to make sure that you're reading carefully. While I'm on the logic topic, one of the majors that performs the best on the law school admission test, this is somewhat surprising to some people, but computer science majors and electrical engineers tend to do really well on the law school admission test because they're used to very literal, very detail-oriented logical statements. Yeah, people who are really, really good at English and people who are really, really good at logic tend to be naturally good at the law school admission test. The last thing that I believe the test is probing for is your ability to work. And the reason why I think they are testing your ability to work is that they've got 90 something of these practice tests. And especially if we look at logic games specifically, logic games, LSAT logic games, are these logic puzzles that don't really appear anywhere else in the world. They're all kind of similar, but they're all kind of different in but they all are like clearly LSAT logic games. And boy, can you improve a lot on the LSAT logic games if you're willing to put in the work. Anybody here suck at the LSAT logic games? Is that anybody's worst section? I see a bunch of hands there. Thanks, y'all. Most people have that as their weakness. That was my weakness when I started. Anybody here, have you done all 90 of the practice tests worth of logic games and still suck at logic games? Didn't think so. Because that's not really a thing. I'm not saying you're going to automatically be perfect as soon as you've done all of those 400 practice games, but you can't do that much work and not improve significantly. Many of our students at LSAT Demon start off with a weakness in games and end up with games as far and away their best section on the test. I know that is like hard to believe, especially if that's the first time you've ever heard it, and if you're brand new and you're really struggling on the games. I understand that you think that you might not ever be able to get there on the games, but I've just never met a student who can't eventually unpack it. Now, I have met students who can't unpack any of the three sections of the test, mostly because, their English isn't good enough, their logic isn't good enough, like they don't work hard enough. I mean, they're just like not situated to do well on any aspect of the test. But when I see people who are okay at reading comp, but they suck at the games, or they're okay at logical reasoning, but they suck at the games, that's just a matter of work. It's not about, oh, your brain doesn't work that way. It's you haven't done the practice yet. And if you put in the time, I promise you will improve dramatically on the logic games. I've seen students go from complete zero, right? Like random chance. They do the section and they get 3 out of 23 on logic games. 3 out of 23, that's really bad. That's less than what you would get if you just randomly guessed on every question. So somehow these people are like repelling the correct answers. Like I'm talking about bad on the logic games. I've seen that same student eventually end up scoring perfectly on a section of the logic games. Not saying it's going to happen overnight, but I am saying that they are testing how hard you can work. And if you demonstrate to them how hard you can work, you are going to improve dramatically on the LSAT overall, but especially on the LSAT logic games. So they're testing English, they're testing logic, they're testing how hard you can work. The people who score in the 170s tend to have a strong cocktail of those three elements. Me personally, I don't have the last one. I should never have gone to law school because I don't have the work ethic that's required to be a lawyer. Unfortunately, I didn't learn that until I was, halfway through law school. I have the English. I have the logic. I prepared for, like a month. I did LSAT logic games and was able to score perfectly on the logic games on my official test. And I scored a 179 on my official test. I only took it once. I scored 179. That might make you think that like, oh my God, Nathan is really cut out to be a lawyer. Absolutely not, because I got there on like raw horsepower, and it's actually not that good of a thing. I think the people who are more cut out for law school are the ones who struggle a bit with the LSAT, but then overcome it through hard work. Because I've said this before, but I know a lot of lawyers, and I'll put lawyers up against any other field for how hard you can work. And that wasn't me. So don't feel bad if you are lacking on the English part a little bit. You can get better at that. Don't feel bad if you're lacking on the logic part. You can practice. You can get better at that. if you've got the work ethic, there's endless improvement that can be made. We regularly see people improve by 20 points or more on the LSAT. Not everybody is guaranteed, of course, to improve by 20 points or more, but we do see people improve by that much. 20 points. It's a life-changing amount of improvement. If you go from 140 to 160, you go from a student who probably wouldn't even get into almost any reputable law school with a 140 to a student who not only will you get in, but you will get multiple full ride scholarship offers to law schools if you have a 160. I really do believe that we can change people's lives. It happens kind of all the time. It requires some work. You have to humble yourself and ask good questions of your teachers. And yeah, you can improve by just a wild amount of LSAT improvement. I mean, it puts you in a whole different league of schools, and it also could save you $150,000 worth of tuition. So this test is worth studying for.